Hey, Katie.
Hey, Ben.
What are we talking about today?
I thought it would be fun to talk a little bit about Kaggle, the machine learning competition website, and some of the ways that it can surprise you unpleasantly when you are competing in it.
All right, you are listening to Linear Digressions. So, given that I'm not actually a data scientist, I've not actually gone to this website. What is Kaggle?
Kaggle is a machine learning competition website. So the idea is that at any given time, they have a number of competitions that they host, and individuals or small teams can go online and there's a data set that has all the covariates and the dependent variable for you to build a supervised learning model. And you can get that data set, and there's sort of a definition of what the problem is that they want to solve here with this data set, but it's roughly build the best model that you can with this data, predicting. They tell you what to predict and maybe what metric to use as well. And so you put together a model, and then there's a submission process whereby once or twice a day you can submit your model. And the place where we're going with this, let me explain a little bit then what happens when you submit your model, because it's going to be important for understanding what we're talking about.
And one quick question: if I'm a data scientist, why would I want to do this? I assume these are companies that are putting up these competitions, and there's some kind of reward.
Oh, right, yeah. So for a lot of the competitions, if you come in the top 3 or the top 5 or something, you can actually win a substantial amount of money.
Oh,
And
wow.
even if you don't come in the top few like that, there's a lot of sort of street cred, so to speak, that sometimes people attach to doing well in Kaggle competitions. It's kind of fun because it's this almost like open competitive playground where lots and lots of different people can go in and sort of see who's the best. So if you actually end up doing really well there, then that kind of can be validating of
You get cred, and maybe companies might come looking for data scientists and notice that you've got cred on this site and try and pick you up.
Sure, yeah.
It almost reminds me of GitHub. I mean, GitHub is a site for contributing to open source software. There's there's not a competitive aspect of it, but there is that public visibility factor. So even if you're not necessarily getting monetary rewards, there's still some like intrinsic incentive because it's open.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's a chance for you as a data scientist or data analyst or machine learning researcher or whatever to kind of show the world your best stuff. And that's kind of neat to see a whole bunch of people from all over the world competing with each other and seeing who can build the best models.
Okay, so you were saying that there's a potential problem.
Oh, right. So let me explain the submission and scoring process for these models. So let's suppose I'm competing in a Kaggle competition, and usually there's sort of a time bound on the competitions that have especially the ones that have money attached. So it might be something like there's 3 months where the competition is open. And so at the end of 3 months, that window is going to close. And during that 3 months, I can submit, I think the limit is twice a day, but I could be wrong about this. We'll say it's twice a day. Twice a day, I can go online and I can submit my model to sort of the submissions process. And what happens when I do that is there's some training data that I was able to download when I entered the competition. That's what I've used to train my model and to do any cross-validation that I'm interested in, that sort of thing. Then there's also what's called the public leaderboard validation set, or test set if you like. And so what this is it's a data set that Kaggle has held back and that they keep on their servers. And so when I submit my model, that model is used to make predictions on that public leaderboard test set. And then those submissions, depending on how many of those I get right, go into a score that ranks me relative to everyone else who's submitted their models. And then there's what they call the public leaderboard, which is how well everyone's models are doing. So at any given point, I submit my model, and then I can see how good my model is doing compared to everyone else's.
Neat. So that's basically a way of saying, let's say that I've got the data set on my machine and I've built a model to run against it. and I've gotten really, really good at this particular data set, and maybe I've overfit it a little bit. So I'm really good with this data set, but I'm not actually necessarily going to do as well on a more generalized data set. And so that's the reason that Kaggle holds back some data, so it can test my model when I submit it against a data set that my model hasn't seen before to see if it's generalizable.
Well, right. So when I was building my model, if I was cross-validating it properly, then I should have a pretty accurate idea of how well it's going to do on another data set. But like you said, I can overfit my model a little bit to my training data. And then when I go and submit it and have it make predictions on one of those test sets that Kaggle holds back, then that generalizability comes back into play, because obviously this is a data set that I didn't have available to me when I was training. Therefore, hypothetically, I can't overfit to that data. But this is where the trick comes in, actually. And I think that this is it's pretty fun and interesting, although, like I said, it can be an unpleasant surprise. So the last part of this scoring process, I mean scoring in the sense of scoring how well your model does against all the other ones, is that the public leaderboard is just a way for me to sort of benchmark my model against everyone else's. It is not actually used to decide who wins the competition.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. In fact, there's actually a third data set that they call sort of like the private leaderboard data set, if you like. And no one has access to that data, even indirectly, until the competition is over. And that data set is what they actually use to determine who wins the competition.
Right, and that makes sense, because you're gonna go and train a model on some data set, and then if you want to actually use that model in production or to predict things or with new data that you've collected in the future, obviously the model will have never interacted with that future data. So it's not fair to judge a model based on data that it's ever come in contact with.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. But you can imagine how when you're building the model, let's say, I have this chance to submit my model, see how well it's doing versus everyone else's, and then tweak my submission and submit a new one and then see how it's doing and iterate on this. And so you can imagine that even though I don't have direct access to the public leaderboard data set, I can still end up overfitting to it, because I'm making decisions about which model I think is like quote unquote the best based on how well it does on that data set. And so if I have a model that, because of some, sort of local fluctuations, a little bit of noise, a little bit of luck, whatever, let's say there's 10,000 examples in the public leaderboard data set. Let's say there's a model, I have two models that are fundamentally the same, but one of them happens to get an extra 4 predictions right that the other one gets wrong. I mean, if I'm really looking closely at those two models, then I might take that as a sign that the one that got the extra 4 right is the quote unquote better model. But there's really no reason that that's actually the case. It's just kind of an accident that it happened to get those right. And so if you have enough of those little incidents, those incidents can start to stack up on top of each other as well. And so it might be 4 events here and 3 events there and 10 events over here. And pretty soon I've convinced myself that I'm getting, maybe a few percentage points better from model, C or D or E than I was from model A. But now I have a model that is not going to generalize as well to an unknown data set, because I picked this model on the basis of the fact that it's fitting some noise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really tricky. So how does one avoid doing this, I guess? I mean, obviously you don't want to see yourself in the leaderboard, tweak it, and then, go through that process and overfit to the test data. That doesn't actually do you any favors, even if you see your name rise in the leaderboard before the final judging. So, what kind of methods would one use to avoid overfitting to that second data set?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So a few things. Number one is that if you're cross-validating properly, doing something like a k-fold cross-validation, that will be fairly robust to overfitting. That'll be more robust to overfitting in general than looking at the performance on any one data set. And so take seriously the indications that you're getting from your own internal cross-validation when I was reading up about experiences that people have had with this problem, some of the people who've had this problem say the thing that it teaches them is to just ignore the public leaderboard and only make decisions based on what your own cross-validation is telling you. I don't think that's quite the smartest thing to do, because there is more data to be gained in the public leaderboard data set in general. Like, it's more information that you have available to you that can tell you how your model is doing. Mm-hmm. But instead of, say, completely relying on that to help you guide your choices with what model you're going to submit, maybe take some sort of average of your own cross-validation metrics and the public leaderboard data set, and don't take either one of them by itself, but maybe some in-between number of the two. The other thing that I would point out is that, especially at the tip top of these competitions, there's a lot of luck that goes into winning, honestly. Especially some of these very popular competitions, the big ones, there might be only a very small, you have to go out to the third decimal place to get between first place and second place, or first place and 10th place or something.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's the territory where, again, I think there's sometimes just luck that comes into it. And right. I wouldn't say that two models that you have to go out to the third decimal place to see which one is better. I wouldn't say that those are significantly different models. And so I think you should just have a little sense of perspective that to a certain extent it's out of your control. You submit the best model that you can, but you have to be skeptical of these very small incremental differences between models. Chances are that, again, a third decimal place difference is not actually telling you something about what the better model is. And then the third thing that I would point out is, again, talking about these big competitions, it's easy to get caught up in the idea that, I was in 10th place on the public leaderboard, and then they closed the competition and I fell to 200th place or something like that. This is a fairly extreme example, but that does happen. Like, the other thing to keep in mind is that it sounds like that's a huge drop, and I guess if you're looking at the number of places that you drop, that is a lot. But because very often with those big competitions, you have lots and lots of people who are all converging on effectively the same model. And so they have lots of models that are all in this really tight pack together, that even a very small difference in the absolute performance of your model can be a big drop, because there's just, if you go from an AUC of 0.65 to 0.6498, if there are 100 people who are at 0.6499, then you just drop below all of them. And it looks like, everything the bottom has fallen out from under you, but it's really just that there were lots and lots of people who were in there together. And so, again, you shouldn't take it too personally, I guess. And I think that looking at the number of places that you fall is also probably not the best way to think about the performance of your model, because that's just as dependent as on the other people you're competing against as it is telling you anything about the performance of the model that you built.
So, Katie, I have to ask, have you been bitten by this phenomenon?
I have not, and that is not because I am super smart. It is because I never actually have time to do Kaggle.
Okay, so it's just that you don't have time.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it is I have time for one data science hobby, and as it happens, it is this podcast.
Hey, I'm flattered and honored.
Oh, well, I mean, the pleasure's all mine. But yeah, no, what really ends up happening is any time that I would spend on Kaggle, I end up just reading papers for this and editing wave files and all this other stuff, which I'm delighted to do. But this has protected me from the disappointment of...
That's interesting.
yes, of Kaggle competitions.
I have a similar story. It's not with data science, but... there are so many interesting, fun coding challenges, algorithmic problems. As a front-end web developer, there's a lot of front-end web developer stuff as well. And I don't know, if I had more time, I think I would really enjoy doing some of these riddles. I think I would learn a lot from doing them and gain a lot of experience with problems that I probably wouldn't otherwise try to solve. Same thing here. I just don't have enough time. So... it seems to me like these websites are great if you dedicate a lot of time to them, or if you have a decent amount of time, even if you're beginning. Because although you may not end up winning a lot of competitions, it does get you experience with a lot of these real world problems that actually people are trying to solve, and that have utility when they are solved.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. It's a great way to get started as a data scientist. It's also a place where you learn a lot about different modeling types. So in general, I think Kaggle is really great. I think one thing to keep in mind is that the idea that you're starting from a fairly tidy data set with a well-defined problem, that's very often not the world that we live in as data scientists. A lot of the struggle that we have is figuring out what problem it is we're trying to solve and like where we're going to get the data. So the point at which you have a table and a well-defined problem, like, the problem is almost all the way solved at that point. But I think it is really useful to see. I think the competitive aspect especially, really brings out the best in people sometimes. People get really, really into it and they think really hard about the problems, and sort of that competitive atmosphere. Everyone gets really pushed by one another. And there's just some really great learning that you can do when you're competing on there, and it's super fun too.
Linear Digressions is a Creative Commons endeavor, which means you can share or use it any way you like. Just tell them we said hi. To find out more about this or any other episode of Linear Digressions, go to lineardigressions.com. And if you like this podcast, go ahead and leave us a review on iTunes so other people get to listen to this content too. You can always get in touch with either of us. Our emails are ben@lineardigressions.com and katie@lineardigressions.com in case you have comments or suggestions for future shows. You can tweet us at lindigressions. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.